Hello and welcome to Perpetual Parenting. This podcast is facilitated by Life Fellowship Foursquare Church in Fort Morgan, Colorado. It comes from a series of messages shared by Pastor Derek Brown in 2024. Virtually everyone is parenting someone. Your own children, your grown children, your grandchildren, your aging parents, your coworkers, yourself. Look, people aren't perfect. Therefore, parents aren't perfect. And we often find ourselves catch-up parenting. It's a perpetual process. In part 4, titled Discipline, there is no one right way, but we found a lot of wrong ones. Discipline is a polarizing discussion in our culture. Everyone has ideas about how discipline should or should not be carried out, and nobody agrees with anyone else. Regardless of where you stand, discipline shouldn't be something you do to your child, but rather something you do for your child. In this entry to our parenting discussion, we look at how we can look at discipline differently with grace and purpose. So whether you're a new parent, a seasoned parent, or just someone who's surrounded by immature adult kids, dig in as we learn how to serve them all better through perpetual parenting. So if you're a parent, this series is for you. If you are not a parent, this series is still for you. So don't tune it out, all right? The whole point is, the whole structure is that we are always parenting. If we haven't had children yet, we are getting ready to. If we have children, we are parenting them. If our children have moved out, we are still parenting our adults and helping them parent their little ones. If we work with young people, we are parenting the young people. If we work with people that have had traumas when they were younger and weren't able to necessarily grow up, we sometimes find ourselves parenting people like those. Sometimes we have to parent ourselves. We are perpetually, constantly, never-ending parenting, guiding, giving our life to someone, okay? So while this series is directed towards parents or people that are going to be parents or people that are directly working with children, if you are not in that group, that's fine, okay? Now, last week, we talked about how everything changes except the things that don't. And we looked at a handful of things that every child needs all the time, okay? And some of your young adults that maybe grew up in homes that weren't ideal are going to still need this stuff moving forward into their 20s and even sometimes into their 30s or throughout their entire life. So one of these things is safety and boundaries, okay? So if you work at a place where you have young people and you have like a 20-something working for you and you just give them free rein to do their job and they don't do well at it, they probably need boundaries to flourish. And so if you give them some guidelines, then they'll be able to make the thing that you want them to make. It's kind of like, do you guys remember Home Improvement? Love that show. There's one episode, one of the later episodes, where Tim Taylor's son, the youngest son, I don't remember his name, Mark, the youngest son, Mark. How do I remember his name? Anyway, so Tim Taylor is doing this video at his work. He wants a video for this car that they finished at the show. And he brings in his son to make the video. And he says, "Son, you're good at making videos, make this video." And so his son does it. But it comes out as this super goth, really like kind of grungy, sort of a artistic style thing. And his dad looks at the video and goes, "That ain't it." And Mark goes, "Well, you told me to make a video. I made a video. This is what artistically is whatever." And then Tim Taylor learns throughout the episode that he needed to give his son guidelines so that they could both be fulfilled, so that they could both get the thing that they want. And you'll remember this episode because this is the video that they come out with at the end is the one that is the Grease Lightning video from that show. So that's the episode. It's the one that comes out with the Grease Lightning with the blue car that they finished, and then they turn it red, even though it was so much better when it was blue, but whatever. All right, so safety and boundaries are necessary even for our older people, even as we get older, okay? It's kind of like when you're bowling, right? Sometimes people need the guides up, okay? You can go bowling and you can bowl a 30, but it'd be a whole lot more fun if you had the bumpers up and were able to at least pretend like you did better, right? All right, that's enough of that. We also need loving and healthy touch, okay? Everybody needs physical touch, but everybody needs it differently. Someone who's had trauma in their lives needs physical touch differently than someone who hasn't. Some people with different personality types, different love languages, all of these things lead to needing different types of physical touch, but we all need it, okay? For some people, simply like a fist bump is going to give them the dopamine or whatever it is that they need. For Xander, he needs the most full-on hug that you can possibly come up with. Like, you don't have enough arms to hug the boy the way that he wants to be hugged, right? It's just nature. It's the way it is. But loving and healthy touch is something that all children need. You cannot spend too much time with a child, okay? Intentional quality time. This is not just time where we're sitting next to each other, although that is quality time and that does count. And in certain contexts, it's very, very beneficial. But we want to be intentional in all of the things that we do with children. Now, on the note of quality time, when I was a young person, some of the best quality time moments I had were when someone was working. I had a friend who owned a roofing company, and another friend who worked part-time with the roofing company delivering shingles. And this is just one example of many, but one day I didn't have much going on. And Kent said, "Hey, I'm delivering this thing. It's in Montana. It's like 2 hours away. You want to come?" I said, "Yes, sir. When are you leaving?" He said, 20 minutes. I said, "Let me run to my house. Let me drop off some stuff, grab some things, and I'll be here." And I jumped in this truck, and we spent 2 hours up on a dirt road and 2 hours back on a dirt road. And he taught me stuff about driving and how to drive on a dirt road when you can't see. He saved my life a number of times just in that part of the conversation. But we spent 4 hours just hanging out and talking, okay? Shortly after I moved here, Dave McCracken said, "Hey, I want you to see what's going on. I want you to see how the silage system works and how the co-op works with the silage stuff." I said, "Okay, great. Let me know when I'm in and I'll go out with you." And then Dave goes, "Yeah, I'm actually going to send you out with Matt, my son, because he's there and it'll be good for you." Kind of glad. It worked out pretty well. So I get in the truck with Matt, and I hadn't really, I'd met him, I'd shaken his hand, but I hadn't really talked with him. And so here I am. Technically, Matt's like a year younger than I am, but we sat in this truck together, ended up being 4 or 5 hours, and we talked about everything. And that's the kind of quality time that I'm talking about. Like, we're not parenting one another per se, but we both need quality time where people pour into us, and we were able to pour into each other that day. It was a very, very good day. At least it was for me. He might have a different opinion. Talk to him about that after service. Finally, encouraging words. We all need encouraging words. Some of us grew up in a generation where you did not get encouraged. You did not get told you did a good job. If you didn't get yelled at about the job, you assumed you did well and you moved on. Otherwise, you got yelled at about the job. That's not how humans work. That's not how humans grow, okay? We need positive input. We talked last week about how if you're struggling with a child, or you're struggling with somebody who's got a bad attitude or is constantly doing things that are getting on your nerves, if you try to have a 4-to-1 ratio of praise to criticism, okay? So for every one time you have to straighten them out, you give them 4 positives. Even if it's like, "Thank you for putting your dish on the counter. Thank you for rinsing it off. Thank you for picking up your socks when you took them off. Thank you for hanging up your coat when you came in the house." The littlest things, those positive things stack up, and eventually our tone and our attitude changes. What kids tend to hear is, when we say, "You didn't do that right," they hear, "I'm a failure. I didn't do it right. I'm not good enough." That cannot be the thing that they hear most. Cannot be. So we want to just pour in all that stuff. Now, we are moving forward into today's conversation. And before we do that, I want to stop. And I think we've talked about this. I'd like to think we're all on the same page here, but we're humans. And humans trash themselves constantly. I'm willing to bet there's a good 15 or 20 people that aren't here because they don't want to hear about raising children because they feel like they've failed, or that they're not going to be, or that they're not going to be good at it, and they don't want to hear this conversation. And of the people in this room, I would consider that probably about 50% hear this conversation and get sick in the stomach because I didn't do good enough. My kids deserved better. I wasn't the parent I wanted to be. I'm not the parent I want to be currently. All of that is trash. Don't listen to that mess. Parenting is about getting up tomorrow and doing the best you can, and getting up the next day and doing the best you can, and getting up the next day and doing the best that you can. It's about the day-to-day. It's not about everything that happened up till now. It's about what do I do tomorrow? You cannot change the past, but you can affect tomorrow. So if you're a parent, if you're working with teens, if you're working with anybody of any age and you're kind of pouring into them in this parental style, there is no shame in what happened before. But if you don't like what happened before, change it and do something different tomorrow. Okay? I've told you guys a number of times that this is Derek 3.0 and that the Derek that worked in South Dakota is not the Derek that showed up here in Colorado. Over that year transition, I changed and I grew up quite a bit. I'm far more calm now. But my children probably don't recognize this because they were busy growing up. But as a dad, I've gotten much calmer and much quieter, much more peaceful, much more merciful, much more grace-giving, just because I've grown up. Did you guys know that the male voice doesn't mature until about 35? Did you guys know that? That's a long time. I was 37 when we moved here. 38 maybe. But we're constantly growing up. Things are constantly shifting, constantly changing. And as a parent, I have become someone far better than I was. I've always been what I consider to be a good father because I'm striving to, at first I was striving to be the kind of father that I would have wanted. And then after a while, I started striving to become the kind of father that they need. What I wanted was good enough to start, but it wasn't good enough moving forward. Turned out that bar was too low. So I started to try to become the father that they need. And so a lot of this stuff that we're talking about now comes from my experiences with my children. But regardless, no matter what your history is with children, don't feel like a failure. You're not a failure. You have tomorrow to get up and try again. But my kids are already grown up, Derek. My kids are grown up. They're out of the house. What am I going to do now? You're never going to not be raising your children. You're never going to not be interacting with them. You're never going to not be connecting with them. As they become parents and you become a grandparent, you have a chance to do it again. My grandparents, my dad's parents, are not the people that I knew. My grandma and Grandpa Brown, Dale and Martha, they are not the people that my dad grew up with. I heard the stories afterwards. I know how my dad grew up. They were vastly different people when I met them. And you have an opportunity. We all have an opportunity to make tomorrow better than yesterday. But I can't fix what I did in the past. No, you can't, but you can heal tomorrow, right? We serve a God that rebuilds bridges. Oh, I burned down that bridge. Yeah, well, God grows trees and builds new bridges, all right? That's what he does. And so we can be a part of that as we move forward in our parenting. So all of this is super, super important that we let the shame or the frustration or whatever go, because today we're talking about discipline. And everybody hates talking about discipline because it's such it's a conversation that tears us apart, that some people believe this thing, some people believe that thing. Some people are like, oh, we have to be. We were listening to the John Christ stand-up special, and he was talking about how his sister believes that you cannot look down on your child to speak to them. So when her child's throwing a fit, she lays down on the floor next to them because she can't look down at them. And so you're like, well, are you okay? What can I do to help you? So here's what's going to happen. I am going to unload a whole bunch of information about discipline on you. You get to weed through it and decide what is appropriate for you and what you want to hold on to and what you don't want to hold on to. I am simply giving you information. It is your job to weed through it and pick the things that apply to your life, your family, your children, whatever. Okay? All right. So Derek said we have to do this, and I don't want to do that. This is bull. Because in the 90s, there was some pastor guy that said, hey, you have to beat your children every time they do anything ever. And a friend of mine listened to that. Well, not my friend, my mom's friend, listened to that. And I was over at their house for one day, and their kid got spanked like 20 times. Like every time he looked at him funny, back to the room and spank him. And it come out, now you got to pray and apologize and have to do all these things. It didn't work. It didn't help anybody. So don't just listen to me and do what I said because I have a title. Weed through it. Look at what's going to work for your family, work for your children. I'm not going to tell you to beat your children. We're actually going to look at just a little bit of it. We'll look at that a little bit here in a little bit. But Discipline must always be correction that is driven by love. This is across the board, okay? If you're at work and you are overseeing a team of people, when you correct them, it has to be from a place of love. If you're just saying, you did something stupid and it came back on me and crap rolls downhill, so I'm coming at you, that's not acceptable. We are called to something better. Discipline must be correction driven by love, regardless of who it is for, okay? If Pastor Lindsay she's awesome. She hasn't ever done anything that I need to talk about. But if she were to do something dumb, because she could, yeah, it's possible. If she were to do something dumb, and I was to say, you did something dumb, and now I'm going to correct you because you made my life harder, that doesn't help anybody. That we don't grow as a church family. We're not enriched. But if I come to her from a place of love and say, you know what, we can do this better in a way that's going to give you life, and it's going to. I worked with a guy, Pastor Brent. He was so kind that you could go into a room and he could fire you from your job and you would leave with a smile on your face because he would make you feel so loved and so cared for. That's Jesus. Every time somebody would like, okay, church is sometimes really, really dirty. And I would have parents get mad at me for stuff that didn't happen. That they misunderstood, their kids misunderstood, whatever. And Brent and Tana, pastors, would be like, hey, Derek, Pam, come on in. We got to have a meeting. Oh, I hate meetings. So we would come into the meeting, and Brent and Tana would say, all right, what happened? And then we would have a conversation, and they would teach us, and they would train us, and they would encourage us, and we would leave feeling better than when we went in. When we had just gotten in trouble, but we would leave feeling better. We can do that. That is Christ in us. Okay? Discipline should not be something you do to your child, but for your child. Okay? Now, this discussion is not about spanking versus not spanking. This is about discipline and why discipline needs to happen, why we need to be disciplining people, okay? But we're going to talk just a little bit about spanking for just a quick moment because I really, I feel like I'd be missing it if I didn't talk about this. You can't talk about discipline with children and not cover this subject because it is such a big subject. Proverbs 13, verse 24. Everybody quotes it as, spare the rod and spoil the child. That's what we read. That's what we hear. That's what we share. But the actual language says, those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. This verse is not about children. This verse is about parents doing their job. It is saying, if you do not care enough to keep your children straight, to challenge them to grow, to challenge them to become who God has called them to be, you essentially hate them because you are setting them up for failure in life. And you cannot love your children and set them up for failure in life at the same time. This is not about the children. This is about the parents. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Now, in our language, in our world, the word rod is something that you beat people with. This rod would have been a shepherding rod. Shepherding rods are for redirecting. Okay, if I remember correctly, if your sheep are getting away, you have a rod, you throw your rod, it hits the ground, they hear the noise, and it moves the sheep over. We are guiding our children. So when it says those who spare the rod of discipline, those who refuse to guide their children are failing their children. That's what this is about, all right? But we've used this for generations to justify spanking, to justify violent correction, right? The last time I spanked anybody, Xander would have been 5 or 7. And it was him, because he got most of them. Look, Errol's like Pam. Okay, when Pam was little, her brother and her sister, Pam's the middle child, so often forgotten, sure, but today she gets to be in the story. And her bigger brother would get in trouble, and her younger sister would get in trouble, and Pam would look back and say, okay, don't do those things. And she would step back, and she would not get in trouble. Hardly ever. Errol's like that. Errol's like, oh, Xander got in trouble for that. I'm going to do that anymore. Or if I say, Errol, don't do that. Even when she was like 2 years old, okay? She's her love language is words of affirmation. So if you told her at 2 years old, if you said, no, that was a bad choice, she would break down. She would lose her mind in like turmoil, like, ah! And you just used words, right? So she would correct herself. She would turn the boat, whatever. And she still does that most of the time. The boy, on the other hand, doesn't pay so much attention, especially when he was little. So at 5, 7, somewhere in there, it was time. He had done something and a spanking was coming. And our process was, he would get in trouble. We would de-escalate the situation. I would send him to his room. Once he was calm, I was calm. I would come in. We would have a conversation about what had happened and what the consequence was going to be. He would get a spanking. We would hug. We would talk it out. And then it would be over. And we would move on with our day. Okay? That was the process. We were trying to be very appropriate with it. Okay? This particular day, we've done the first part. He de-escalated. He went to his room. I made sure that I was in a good headspace. I walked into his room, and when I walked into his room, he hit the floor and freaked out and started screaming as if I was someone who beat him, like violently, aggressively, inappropriately beat him. And I just turned around and I walked out of the room and I said, Pam, I don't think we can do this anymore. She said, yeah, I don't think we can do this anymore. And it never happened again. We never spanked again. I will tell you that life got harder. A lot harder. Because, well, let me see, how did I put this in here? I wrote it down. I'm going to see how I wrote it. So we realized that spanking wasn't going to work, but the kids needed consequences. They needed discipline. They had to learn. They had to grow. They had to recognize that when they make a mistake, there are consequences for the mistake. When they make a bad choice, there are consequences for the bad choice. Now, this is not a popular statement, especially amongst churches, but here it is. Spanking doesn't really work. Studies show that it leads to depression and anxiety, and those various studies show that it triggers the same portion of the brain that sexual abuse triggers. Now, you can read that in The Effect of Spanking on the Brain by Jill Anderson at Harvard GSE. But what that means is spanking is not the same as sexual abuse. Spanking trauma is not the same as sexual abuse trauma, but spanking causes the brain to develop in a similar way. Okay? So if kids that grow up being spanked will interact with the world, they will hear danger, they will hear, their body will protect itself in a similar way as those who have been sexually abused. 50 years of studies have backed this up. But still, a third of parents in America spank their children. And you can do it, and it works. It's quick. It gets a change in behavior. But spanking alone won't get a change in understanding. And the Bible doesn't really show us that. Jesus doesn't walk around with a 2x4 smacking the disciples when they screw up. But if he did, you know Peter would have gotten it. Constantly. Peter slices off a guy's ear. Jesus goes, all right, man, here we go. But he doesn't do that. What Jesus does is he allows natural, real-world consequences to bring us back to him. And when we come back to him, he calls the gold out of our lives. He calls us to become who we're supposed to be. And it's a process, and it takes forever, and it's hard. It is so hard to do as a parent because I want that instant. I want behavior now. But God doesn't expect that of me, and I don't think it's fair to expect that of my children. But what God does is the Romans 12 thing. He renews us by changing the way that we think in a process where every time we interact with him, he changes us a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and eventually our behavior comes around and we start to become the people that he's called us to be. And we can do the same with children, okay? So when spanking my children was no longer an option, I had to learn to communicate with them. I had to learn to communicate with them more. I had to learn to be consistent. I had to learn to be patient. I had to become a far better father than I would have been otherwise. Now, whether it's worked or not, you can decide. You guys interact with my children. They're not perfect. We're going that direction. We're not perfection so much as excellent. They are excellent. All right. That's all we're talking about on that subject. We are now moving into the discipline portion. Okay, we're simply going to talk about discipline and the importance of correcting children, correcting young people so that they do not make the same mistakes, so that they live a better life, okay? Yesterday, Xander got corrected, and he didn't even know he got corrected. We were helping at McCracken's house. We were helping with some sod stuff, and you guys might not know this, but Xander broke both of his arms last winter. Last fall, whatever. Anyway, his muscles aren't back yet. He's not back up to strength. And so we were lifting these 50 to 80 pound rolls of 50 to 80, yeah, that's fair, rolls of grass. And Xander was stacking them on the edge of this trailer so the rest of us could grab them and take them up the hill. And his arms were starting to hurt. And he complained about it for a while. And I said, well, you need to learn to lift with your legs. You need to learn to lift with your legs. And he didn't really want to listen. And he says, it's fine. That's fine. I'll wait. His arms started to hurt more and more. And eventually he was ready to listen. And I said, here's what you're going to do. Walk up to that bale or that roll. And I walked him through the step-by-step of actually positioning his body, straightening his arms, grabbing a hold of the thing, keeping his back, and doing this. And this morning he said, my arms quit hurting after I learned how to lift. Yeah! He got disciplined. He didn't do anything wrong, but I guided him to a better life. I guided him in a way that is going to give him a better life than I had, okay? I have back problems because nobody taught me that. Nobody taught me how to carry myself. Nobody taught me how to engage my core when I walk so that my back isn't carrying my weight all the time. Did you guys know your back isn't supposed to really carry anything? This is supposed to carry everything? I didn't know that until after my back surgery, after my second herniated disc. Yeah, but my kids are in good shape. And I taught Xander yesterday. I was able to get to the point where he was able to listen and I was able to teach him, okay? But here's the thing. Undisciplined parents struggle with discipline. I couldn't have given Xander that information if I didn't have that information. I can't guide my children in a way that I don't understand myself. So it's super important that as parents, as leaders, we're constantly learning and constantly growing. Okay, lifelong learning is so important for everybody across the board. But if you're a parent, you have got to be constantly moving, constantly working, constantly learning, constantly shifting. Because the world is constantly doing those things. Your children are constantly doing those things. And if you want to you want to have the most impact on their lives, you got to be involved, okay? Now, I can say this all day long, but the fact is I'm the most undisciplined person I know. We've talked about it. I have ADHD. That's my big excuse for it, is that I can't be disciplined because I can't be disciplined. I can't do anything consistently. I'm incapable of a lot of these things. But the fact is, there are some disciplines I can get a hold of. And if I'm faithful to get a hold of the stuff that I can, then I'm usually able to get a hold of more. And I have worked more at being a disciplined parent than anything else in my life. Because, like we talked about 2 weeks ago, raising my children is my number one priority. I'm a parent. Raising them and making them good people is number one. So that's the thing I've worked on the most, okay? So let's talk about some undisciplined parenting styles. First of all, helicopter parents. Helicopter parents rescue their children from opportunities to grow. Helicopter parents rescue their children from opportunities to grow. If your children never have to work out the consequences of their choices, they will not grow. When Xander was 5-ish, 4-ish, 2-ish, something, he got a hold of a pencil. You know how I know he got a hold of a pencil? Because he took that pencil and he stuck it on the wall upstairs and he walked all the way over here. And then he walked through the laundry room and down the stairs. And then he hung a left and then he went down on the wall in the basement. And he just penciled the whole thing. He must have stopped to sharpen it halfway through. There was so much lead on this wall, graphite. There's so much. He had to stop and sharp, but he didn't. But you know what he did do? Is get an eraser and erase every last inch of that. He hated it. Oh, it was fun. For me, for Pam, here you go, buddy. He's little. He was little. He could hold the eraser. He could hold the pencil. If he can hold the pencil to make the mark, he can hold the eraser to erase it. And so he's, I hate this. This is so bad. Well, you shouldn't have done it. Yeah, you made a bad choice. Consequences. Never did it again. Never once. Never once. The only other time Xander ever picked up and colored on anything, Pam and I were making a video, and the kids used crayon on my face for this video, and that was on purpose, so it doesn't even count. But helicopter parents rescue their children from opportunities to grow. Oh, they're little. They didn't mean to. That was a mistake. That was an accident. Fine. They still need to learn. They still need to grow. Sometimes grace and mercy is teaching a lesson. Okay, we often think that grace and mercy is pulling us out of the fire so we don't have the consequences. But sometimes the grace and the mercy are the thing that walk us through the consequences so that we can learn appropriately, so that we can learn safely, so that we can learn in a way that helps us to grow, so that we come out better on the other side. So helicopter parents rob their children of growth. And if your children can do no wrong, you might be this type of parent. Problem with this type of parent is they tend to think that, at least in my history, mostly in South Dakota, these types of parents are ruining their children because their kids are legitimately in rough shape. And when you say, hey, your kid did this thing that was inappropriate, the parent said, no, it's okay because this happened in their past. No, it's okay because this. No, it's okay because that. No, it's okay. It's okay. They get to treat people that way because of their past. They get to treat people that way. They get to. It's their right to treat people poorly because they were treated poorly. Not accurate. The world is finally shifting in a way that is appropriate. See, there are things in the world, there are things that people can do that trigger me, that will make me upset, that will make me angry, that will make me not like them, whatever, okay? But here's the thing, my triggers are not your responsibility. It is my responsibility to grow and mature and understand that I'm not mad at you because you necessarily did something wrong, but because you stepped on a wound from my past. That's not your fault that you stepped on a wound from my past. You don't know my past. You don't know my history. I need to learn how to navigate that. I need to learn how to be mature enough to recognize the difference between you hurting me and you simply sticking a finger in a wound. And that's not your fault, okay? I have to be responsible, and I have to teach my children to be responsible for their emotions and their responsibility, okay? Nobody makes you feel anything. You happen to feel things, and you have to learn how to deal with those feelings. Not in the notes, just kind of came out. All right. Next, inconsistent parents. Inconsistent parents create inconsistent people. Inconsistent parenting creates soft boundaries and a broken feeling of safety for a child. Okay, we talk about how children need to feel safe. They need to know that if I break these rules, mom and dad will respond in this fashion. Okay, that is safety, that is boundaries, that is what children need. They need to know that if I make this mistake, this is what is going to happen. And it needs to be that way every time. If mom and dad are inconsistent, the children don't have a safe boundary because I don't know what's going to happen if I cross this line. Okay? My relationship with my dad was kind of like that. I didn't know what was going to happen. So when I was around my dad, I was on eggshells all the time because I didn't know what response was going to happen. I didn't know if the little mistake that I made was going to have big repercussions or if he was going to let it go. I never knew. So much so that when I was 19 and it was time to tell my dad that I felt like I was called to Bible school and that I was going to go to Canada to go to Bible school, it was the most stress I had ever experienced at the time. He had brought my sister a car for her birthday. She had just turned 16. She's 3.5 years younger than I am. And I was driving him back home, and I was in the car, and I was terrified. And I'm facing forward, sweating. I said, Dad, I feel like I'm supposed to go to Bible school. And I was waiting for him to scream at me because that was what was coming. That was what I expected. And instead, he said, I think that'll be good for you. I think you'll make a good pastor. I'm still seizing over it because I did not know what dad was going to do. I didn't know where he was coming from. I didn't know what kind of a response I was going to get. And so as a parent myself, I have been very inconsistent because I'm not very disciplined. So I'm not a very consistent parent. But that's one of the things that Pam and I have worked on the most. We have tried to build systems that I could attach myself to so that I could be more consistent. So when Xander was little and I couldn't spank him, if we were in the store and he was misbehaving, I'd say, okay, Xander, that's one. That's a 5-minute section of timeout when we get home. Okay, Xander, that's 2. 5 minutes, so 10 minutes of timeout. If he got up to 6, that was a half hour. That was the rest of the day in his room when we got home. We were able to build things that would keep me consistent so that he would have a consistent parent, even though I'm not a consistent parent. You understand? All right. Multi-parent families need to have a singular parent mindset. When I was growing up, this was really easy for my mom. She probably doesn't recognize that it was easy for her, but Mom, this was easy for you because you were the only one that we were talking to. If I had a question, can a friend come over? I could ask my mom, and that's all I could ask. That's the only person I could ask. So it was really easy. But when you have 2 parents, things get dicey because mom and dad have to be on the same page. Parents have to be on the same page if they're going to be consistent. We have to have a single parent mindset. Okay? Is Justice in here? Did he leave? Oh, man. Last Sunday, Justice came up to me and said, hey, can I come to your house this afternoon? Nope. I was busy doing other stuff. I was in a different headspace, so no, you cannot come over. And then on Tuesday, I was like, oh, yeah, it was funny. Justice came, I was talking to Pam. I was like, it was funny. Justice came up and asked if he could come over on Sunday. She goes, oh, really? He asked me too. And Pam said no, too. It's a good thing we're on the same page. But this is an example. Don't feel bad. It's fine. Kids do it. Xander probably has done it recently, so don't worry about it. But when Pam and I worked at the group home, we had this thing called double staffing. And that was where if a group home resident, say, asked a staff member from the morning shift if they could do a thing, and they said no, and then they were to ask the afternoon shift the same question, we called that double staffing. And we would put things in their notes every day for every student or for every resident. We had to write out notes about what they did, what they asked, all this stuff. And if we caught them double staffing, asking multiple people trying to get different answers, they would get in trouble for that. So when Pam and I grew up and had our own children, we have double parenting. And if we find out that the kids are trying to split us, they're going to be in so much trouble. So much so that the only way that they do this at all is, which is fair, okay, if I ask mom this, is she going to let me do it, or is it more likely that dad will let me do it? If it's getting out of school, we're going to ask mom if we can get out of school. If it's doing something dangerous, let's ask dad, because dad will most likely say yes to doing something dangerous. That's fair. Okay, we are different people. They are more likely. And plus, if the parent that says yes to whatever is going to carry the consequences of that. But this is what we do. When one parent makes a decision, that's it. If the kids ask Pam something and she says yes or she says no, I don't have to like that answer. That doesn't have to be the answer that I would have given. That is the answer until Pam and I have a chance to sit down and discuss it. And if when we sit down and discuss it, or as a team we change our minds, then we move forward from that. But I am never going to let my children be the intermediary between parenting choices between Pam and I. They don't need to carry that responsibility, and they need to know that when their mom says yes or no, the answer is yes or no. And they need to know that when I say yes or no, the answer is yes or no. And that it is going to be that way unless the parents get together. And 90% of the time, Pam and I know each other well enough that if I said no for a reason, then I had a good reason, and vice versa, right? So, multiple parent families need to have a singular parent mindset. This gets harder and harder when we start talking about step parents and we start talking about co-parenting, and we start talking about having more than 2 parents. We're talking about 2, 3, 4 parents, 4, 5 voices involved in raising this child. It's like you need to start scheduling meetings weekly just to sit down and talk about where is the kid and where are we going, which is actually probably a really good idea if you're in a co-parenting situation. Having meetings about your child, yeah, scheduling that kind of stuff might really, really suck, but you know what's worse is having this split parenting thing because we're not all on the same page. Next, we need to have fair expectations. I expect obedience, and I expect it now. And I get obedience now. But it wasn't always that way. It's something that I always wanted and I struggled with, and Pam challenged me on it quite a bit because we unfairly expect immediate and cheerful obedience. We expect our young children to do as they're told and do it with a smile now. But how often do we do that? When was the last time your boss asked you to do something you didn't want to do and you did it instantly and with a smile on your face? And joy in your heart. We don't. See, and I don't know if this is cultural. I don't know if this is just in the U.S. or if this is a broader thing. I don't know if this is generations long. This is probably generations long. But we have this situation where, as parents, we get to behave however we want, but our children have to behave perfectly. And if they behave the way that I do, they're in trouble and I'm not. If my children threw fits the way that I throw fits, they would be in so much trouble. And there is nobody calling me up. And I have to recognize that. And I have to hold myself to the same standards that I hold them to. And I try. I'm not perfect, not great at it. I'm having to undo a lifetime of do as I say, not as I do from my parents. That was my dad's favorite phrase. Do as I say, not as I do. But we unfairly expect immediate results. So this is something that I started doing for my kids when they were younger. When they were really little, I started counting down from 3. Not counting up to 3, I started counting down from 3. And that was and whatever speed I was counting would give them enough time to begin the task I asked for. So if I said, Xander, I need you to get in the car, and he starts to argue, I go 3, 2, 1. And if he's not 3 steps into his walk to the car, he's going to get consequences. So fast forward, Xander's probably 8 or 9 or something, however old he would have been in 2018. It's 2018 where we'd done you guys know Aglow at all? Aglow? The women's ministry Aglow. We had done worship for this regional Aglow meeting, and we were done. We packed up the sound system, packed up all the instruments, and we were getting ready to leave, and Xander and Errol were doing something. And there was this grandparent age couple that was kind of standing off to the side. And I said, kids, get in the car. We got to go. And they didn't. And I said, 3, 2. And by the time I got to 2, they were sprinting to the car. And I kind of smiled like I always do, at least on the inside. And this grandparent couple was like, nice. I said, yeah, we worked hard on that. And he said, yeah, that happens because you have consistent consequences. And I said, you know it. You know I do. My kids know, even now, it's so ingrained in them that if I go 3, 2, their brain triggers and they say, if I do not start moving, I don't expect them to finish the task. I'm not counting to 3 saying you've got 3 opportunities to do the thing I told you to do. I'm giving them time to get started. And if they do not get started in a fair amount of time, they get consequences. And they know it's different speed. They know I'm counting at a fair speed. One time Xander was freaking out. Right after we started this, he's like, Dad, but you're counting from 3 and sometimes things take longer. I said, Xander, how many times have I gotten to 0? Not many. Yeah, because I counted a speed that's appropriate for the job I've asked you to do. Oh. And it's worked really, really well for us. Okay. Something else that we do that's maybe not fair is that we discipline more for attitude than actions. I expect my children to have a good attitude in as much as is possible. Lately, with Errol and her math, we've been kind of butting heads. Like I said last week, she's in algebra right now, and in algebra, I expect her to show her work. She feels like she doesn't have to, and so we're kind of in this like I'm waiting for her to get smacked up enough by algebra to realize that showing her work is good. But she's like, Dad, I don't want to do all of this work. Can I get out of some of this work? And I say no, because Dad always says no if they're trying to get out of school. Because I value every one of those little questions. Why do I have to do this 30 times? Because I want you to. It's going to make me smile. So just do it. And so, like, I believe in the education system. I believe in school. I believe in all of that. We homeschool because it was safer for my children, where when they were little, they would have gone to a school district that wouldn't have been safe. We couldn't afford to get them to another school district, so we started homeschooling. This wasn't about education. I love education across the board in all of the forms that it comes in. What I struggle with is the people and the situations that they find themselves in. Like Xander was in preschool when Sandy Hook happened. So that's kind of where that is in our minds. And like the school district that he would have gone to one year had like 6,000 pairs of underwear delivered by Fruit of the Loom because that's what the school needed most for the students. Like it was a poor district. It was a dangerous space. And we couldn't afford to get, our neighborhood was safe, but we lived in a district that was scarier, gang-ridden. Anyway, so I love education. And lately it's been, Errol, I need you to do this. And she'll be mad. If you've seen my daughter mad, you'll notice, because you can actually see the heat lines coming off of her like a cartoon, and like smoke popping out of her ears. It's her style. She's my baby girl. She is dad through and through. She's gonna have to deal with a lot of that at some point. Xander's got my ADHD style distractedness, but she's got my demeanor, my general demeanor. And so, Errol, I would like you to do this math with a good attitude, or at least a neutral attitude. But if you can't, then just do the work. In Matthew chapter 21, verses 28 through 31, we see a parable that Jesus shares. He says, "What do you think about this? A man has 2 sons. He told the older boy, 'Son, go out and work in the vineyard today.' The son said, 'No, I won't go. I don't wanna.' But later he changed his mind and went anyway. Then the father told the other son, 'You go.' And the younger son said, 'Yes, sir, I will.' But then he didn't." Jesus says, "Which of the 2 obeyed his father?" And the people that Jesus was talking to replied, "The first." If God punished us for attitude instead of actions, can you imagine? But he's kind and he's patient. And we need to be kind and patient with our children as well. Sometimes the attitude isn't going to be there, but you know what? In our adult lives, the attitude is almost never there. We're adults in this country in the year 2024, and we are almost always frustrated, grumpy, tired, exhausted, right? We're generally unhappy and just want to get home. We want to be done with whatever it is that's in front of us. We're never at peace, but we expect our children to behave this way. But what if we gave them the freedom to feel what they're feeling, and we challenged them to do the things that they're being asked to do? And what if doing the thing was enough and the attitude came later? I will challenge my kids' attitude when it's impacting our ability to move forward as a family. The phrase "check your attitude" comes up a lot. But I'm trying to get to the point where I realize that doing the thing supersedes the attitude behind doing the thing. And we can work on the attitude in the long game. Make sense? Jesus recognizes that the action supersedes the attitude. As adults, we almost never enjoy learning, growing, changing, being challenged, but we expect our children to do all of that and do it with a smile. Doesn't seem fair. Okay, I am trying to get done very quickly here. We must never, ever, ever, ever discipline in anger, okay? Because discipline isn't about anger. It's not about justice. It's about challenging our kids to grow. It's about giving them opportunity to change their behavior so that they come out a better person on the other side, okay? But unless we learn and implement a new way, we are doomed to repeat what we already know. Fill this out, write it down, tattoo it on your forearm so you can read it. Unless we learn and implement a new way, we are doomed to repeat what we know. Okay? This is not easy, but generationally, we should be getting better at this stuff. And it starts with you. Okay, my parents did better than their parents. I'm hoping to do better than my parents did. My kids will absolutely do better than I have done. And as the generations move forward, things should be getting better. But unless we learn and implement a new way, we are doomed to repeat what we know. Okay? So you're growing up, your parents are doing something that drives you absolutely nuts, and you say, when I'm a parent, I am never going to do that thing. And then you grow up and you become a parent and you do that thing. Why did you do that thing? Because you didn't learn something new. It's not enough to not like something. We have to replace the information. Okay? We have to replace the information. So whatever it is that your parents did, that you're doing, that you don't like, you have to learn and implement the new thing. It's not just enough to know the new thing. You have to put it into practice. Sometimes it takes baby steps. Sometimes it takes a really long time to work into it. But if we get up every day and we take those baby steps and try to become who we want to be, try to become the parents, try to become the leaders that we feel like we're called to be, eventually the change will happen, okay? Next, we must discipline promptly with a focus on instruction and reconciliation. Okay? The younger the child, the more quickly you need to bring the discipline. But, again, you can't discipline in anger. So there should always be a space. Okay? For me, there's always a space. It's de-escalate the situation. In Xander's current phase of teenhood, that often involves a little bit of yelling just because I have to get above him. Once my voice gets above his voice and he hears it, he comes down, he goes to his room. We take a breath. We have a discussion, consequences happen. Often at this age, the consequences are the discussion. And for a lot of things, it's like, hey, you could have done that better, you know? And he's like, yeah, I know I could have done that better. So what are we gonna do next time? Well, I guess I'll try this next time. Perfect, that's the consequences. Let's move on. It's getting easier as he's getting older because his brain works now and it's fantastic. It's wonderful. Man, when that 14-year-old brain that Errol just picked up, when that thing kicks back in, she's gonna be a force. She's sitting in the back listening to me. I'm having so much fun. She's against the back wall in the kitchen, against the kitchen. So we have to have a moment, we have to take a break, but we do need to bring these things promptly, especially with the youngest children. The youngest children will forget what they did. So you gotta get your parent self under control, get your mind straight, and then go have the discussion, go do the thing with the little kids so that they can grow while they still remember it. But it has to have a focus on instruction and reconciliation, okay? We are not bringing our children justice, okay? If our goal is to bring our children justice, in our American thinking, justice is an end to itself. You did something wrong, you got a consequence, that is it. That is the structure of our mindset, but that cannot be. It has to be with the goal of instruction and reconciliation, okay? So when my children do something, I bring them a consequence. This is your consequence. You're not going to have whatever for a week, but we're going to talk about your behavior and why you did it. And throughout the week, before you get your stuff back at the end of the week, we're going to talk again. What did we learn? Because every time they don't get their stuff, they're going to remember why they didn't get their stuff, and they're going to think about it, and we're going to talk about it. And then at the end, there's got to be reconciliation. There's got to be a moment where we are brought back into the family, where we are brought back into wholeness, okay? Right now, my children are most often getting in trouble for being rude, mean, vile to one another, okay? And often it's, Xander, go to your room. He goes to his room. Again, this isn't fair. It's fair because Errol listens and stops and Xander can't stop. So he ends up getting in more trouble. It feels like it's not right, but he had the same opportunity to shut his mouth. And if he'd shut his mouth, it would be fine. But he doesn't. So he gets sent to his room. Okay? When he comes out of his room, we have the conversation. Okay, are you ready to be cool and rejoin the family? Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. And then we move on. We don't carry it. We don't say 10 minutes later or 10 hours later, tomorrow, remember yesterday? We don't do that. We don't bring this stuff up because the whole point of instruction and reconciliation is that we treat it the way that Jesus treats our mistakes. And we push it away and we move forward. The consequences paid the consequences. They are done. That situation is over and we move forward. I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but that's the goal, okay? So the consequences should never be the end game. Reconciliation should be the end game. Bringing them back into the right standing with the parent, with the family, with whatever happened, okay? In our current culture, it is popular to write people off forever. cancel them, okay? My kid is terrible because they keep making these choices. No, your kid is not terrible. You need to challenge them, help them to grow, work them through things and bring them and reconcile them with the family and bring them back in. Remind them that they're loved, that they're cared for, that you're challenging them because you love them, because you care for them, because you want them to have a better future. Okay? All right. Things I would like for you to consider this week, okay? What are some disciplinary measures your parents used on you that you swore you would never use, but you still ended up using them? We've all got it. We've all got it. One of my dad's ones was he would do this, and he would always do this from when I was super little to super old. He'd sit back. He would get in my face and he used to go, "Child," and he would poke you hard. He would say, "Child, adult," and he would do that. Child, adult. And when I turned 18, I was mad. It was my birthday, and he came over to give me a card, and I looked at him and I said, "Adult, adult." I was just livid. And he sat back and he said, I could see he was struggling with it, but I caught him. Like it was, I caught him in his own structure and he said, yeah. And he let me be. I was obviously still a child, but that's not important. What's important is when I grew up, I've never once done that to my children. Because it's not that my dad's point was wrong. I am the adult. He is the child. There are going to be things that I understand that he doesn't understand. We get that. But I have never once poked him in the chest and pointed out that he was inferior to me. Except for just now. I found more creative ways to do it. I have implemented new things, okay? So what are some disciplinary measures you take now that you feel are better than the ones you experienced as a child? Okay, so what are some of the things that you, when you were a child, you didn't want to do to people when you grew up and ended up doing anyway? And then what are some things that you're doing better at? Okay, let's spend some time this week thinking about how we're winning. All right, God, I thank you so much for this day and this opportunity again to come and worship you. God, I pray that you would rebuild us from the inside out. That those of us that are feeling down about this parent conversation for whatever reason, that you would remind them that tomorrow is a new day full of new grace and new mercy and a new opportunity to become somebody new and to affect the world differently. God, I pray that you would be rebuilding bridges and help us to learn to communicate with the people that we've maybe lost communication with, that we would be able to do all these things that we're talking about, God, because ultimately parents should be the best representation of Jesus to their children. And often we're not. But God, we want to be. And so as you're rewiring our brain and you're changing the way that we think, I pray that you would change the way that we think in the ways that we parent and in the ways that we lead others, so that we could lead them the way that you lead us, with the same grace, the same mercy, the same peace, the same love. God, we thank you for the opportunity to have a new day and try again. In your name we pray. Amen.